All right, thanks everyone. Um, it's really my privilege to be here, not only because I'm obviously a big supporter and fan of what Icon's doing, and having this overlap with the fourth class is fantastic. But the chance to be up here and ask questions with Tim Kendall is a real treat. For those of you who don't know, Tim has really touched some of the most impressive cultures in technology, having worked at Amazon, Facebook, and now Pinterest. And Pinterest is obviously a phenomenal success in terms of size, scale. Even though the news it tends to be filled with Twitter this and Snapchat that, Pinterest is there building the business as big or bigger in terms of uniques, over 200 million now. And Tim saw it an incredible percentage of the entire journey. And so without further ado, I'm going to ask a few questions to get the conversation going, and then open up for questions. Sound good?
That sounds good.
That sounds good. All right. Well, why don't we start? Technology culture is incredibly important, and there's been so much talk amongst the Valley about the big giants now. Amazon, Facebook, Google, Apple, et cetera, and they all have such different cultures. You've had a chance to be at Amazon and Facebook, and now, of course, Pinterest. How would you compare the cultures? What were your big takeaways from each one?
Well, my time at Amazon was probably the shortest, but I would say the thing that I was struck most by in terms of their culture was that, and I'm sure you've all read about it, but in terms of just being there day to day, I was struck by the fact that most of the executives there, and this was true of Jeff Bezos, had an ability to be incredibly rigorous within kind of the operating details, but also kind of operate also very effectively at kind of a high sort of creative and strategic level. And they could kind of switch back and forth seamlessly. I only got to be in a meeting one time with Jeff, but it was a 2-hour meeting. And the first was this was 12 years ago. This was before the Kindle came out. I was working on the software in the Kindle. And so the meeting was about what would the economic kind of business model be for the Kindle in terms of like the relationships that we were going to have with content owners. And so we were going through this line by line model. And you got to realize like the team had been working on this for every day for the last 4 or 5 weeks. And Jeff, of course, was like catching little like nits within this model. And then the second part of the meeting was all about, okay, what else could we put on the Kindle besides books? Like what other sorts of like services and newsletters? And of course, this team had been thinking about ideas of all these different things you could put on the Kindle besides books. And of course, Jeff thought of like 5 things that they had never thought of. So the creativity, sort of the ability to kind of switch back and forth was uncanny, I thought, with Jeff. Admittedly, I was only in one meeting with him, and I thought that sort of pervaded the organization. Facebook, I still, I've only been really in tech companies, Amazon, Facebook, and now Pinterest. I did a little stint advising Tumblr, so I got a little bit of up close and personal with them. The speed with which that company still continues to operate, even at 20,000 people, but that was true. That was true from the beginning. When they were smaller. I got there when there were about 100, 110 people, and I just couldn't believe the kind of breakneck pace at which they would just turn over the whole product. There were moments in, right when Facebook actually launched. When they launched Newsfeed in 2006, it was it was not a deterministic feed. It was an algorithmic feed. So actually, they started with a feed that basically made decisions about the right thing to show to Adam and the right thing to show to Yasmin. And then when Twitter came out, a year or two, so that was 2006. So 2007, 2008, Twitter comes out with a deterministic chronological feed. And Mark thinks, oh shit, like that's actually what feeds should be. And so he flips the whole thing, says we're going to switch to a chronological feed. He changes the user profile. And he does all of this. He just points the organization. They snap to the new marching orders. And then 2 months, like it's all shipped and out there and ready to go. And I remember talking, at the time with Evan Williams at Twitter, and he was just saying, like, how the hell does he move so fast? Like, how does he get that whole team to turn on a dime and then just go? And I think part of it was that it was young. I mean, it was a particularly young company at that time. I mean, Mark was 20 years old, and really most of those, almost all the engineers at the time, 50, 70, 80 engineers, they're all, median age is like 23, maybe. And people had no lives because almost all of them, a lot of them had relocated from Harvard, the ones that they had recruited from Stanford right out of school, and they all had apartments. Mark set up this incentive where if you lived within the mile of the office, you got subsidized rent. So everyone lived right near the office,
Right.
and no one had any time. So everyone had like little mattresses on the ground. I mean, I was renting a converted hotel room on University Avenue above, right across from the Apple store. And all I had was a mattress on the floor, because that's what we all did. And so that was another reason why we sort of moved so fast, is that it was our lives sort of through and through. And that's all anyone kind of thought about. And everyone was drinking the Kool-Aid. I think that there was a cost to that approach. It also was I think there was a cost to being, that initial company being, a group of men, mostly from prestigious colleges. So there was definitely like a bro culture that I think caused not huge problems, but some problems in kind of the early days, just in terms of the breakneck pace, the directness and kind of brutalness that people had with one another. And I share that because I do think that that is a dimension. There sort of was a heavy-handedness that was tolerated there, that when Ben started Pinterest, and then I joined a few years later, I think he, and then when I joined, aligned with the fact that, and this still sustains in our culture today, that we just don't believe that to operate incredibly effectively and execute incredibly well, you have to be harsh and mean to one another. And I don't know I don't think that's conventional wisdom in Silicon Valley. But I sort of like think about us as a little bit the counterpoint to Uber, maybe, in that we've tried to be incredibly thoughtful about the culture, incredibly thoughtful about diversity and inclusion, and incredibly thoughtful about the way in which people treat each other and the way people feel when they walk out the door each day. And we don't get it perfect, but we actually, there's a thesis that if we overinvest in that, we'll have some kind of unfair advantage that will bear out, just in terms of people feeling a loyalty and a commitment, and wanting to stay for longer than kind of the classic 4 years and then punch out because your initial equity grant's done. That was a very long answer, but
No, it's good because
that's the compare and contrast.
I think for the founders in the audience, I know that I personally empathize with the idea of culture being intentional and starting early and thinking about what dimensions. And so it's interesting to hear that you feel like Ben had that intention from the get-go, and that's carried through. So how large is Pinterest now? How many employees?
1,500.
Right, so 1,500. That's kind of that's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, speaking of Pinterest, you've been there through most of the growth, and certainly the growth of the business side. For the folks who are at the earliest stages now, what's your reflection back on those early days? What would you tell yourself to worry about more or worry about less? What advice would you give?
Yeah. Well, I should caveat all this with the fact that I never really had the guts to start anything. I was always like, the guy who sort of read about the guy and said, "Oh, I'll go work for that guy." I never was, or gal. I was never the person like, you all who said, "You know what? I'm going to do it myself. Like, I'm going to be the person." And so I feel a little bit like an imposter giving you all advice, because I've never founded anything or sort of created anything from scratch. I've always been kind of the trusted helper. But I would say a couple things. I think that one thing that we have learned, and it's funny because I just came from an all-day offsite where we were focused on this with my team, which is the team that it's the whole business side of the company. There's this great book that's written by Patrick, I always forget how to pronounce his last name, Lencioni. It's a book called The Advantage. And the essence of the book is that a lot of companies, and I think this is true even in a 5-person company or a 10-person company, when things aren't going quite like you want them to go, the tendency is to go into a conference room and whiteboard and figure out where the strategy went wrong. It is less, the reaction is much less common to be, I wonder if our team is actually healthy and operating in like the way that an optimal healthy team would operate. I wonder if people are really clear on what our North Star is and the principles by which we are going to guide ourselves to get to that North Star. I mean, it's a little bit, you read this book, which is not well written, but the concepts are great. I mean, the book is like paint by numbers. Like it's brain dead simple. It's just like, figure out where you want to go, figure out how, and then repeat that again and again and again. I mean, you know this from being a CEO and a leader in technology. And I think it took us a while to learn that lesson that you have to be incredibly clear about what you're doing, and you have to, as the CEO and as the founder and leader of the company, you have to repeat that again and again, and you have to be brutally consistent about it. Or else you get confusion. And you get confusion, you get misalignments, you get log jams, and no one does anything. And I think that it took us some time to get there. And I think one of the things that happens with founders is that founders and CEOs of these tech companies are so brilliant and so bright. And I've talked to Ben about this, and I think Mark struggled with the same thing. They just get sick of saying the same thing over and over again. And it feels so like pedantic and annoying. And so, I had this experience with Ben early on where I felt like every Monday morning he had a different way of talking about the business. I mean, I remember him coming in one Monday and saying, I've got it. I think what Pinterest is it's like the Finder in Mac OS. We're the Finder, and the folders are boards and files are pins. And I would always think at the end of this, I'm like, God, that is a really brilliant abstraction. But please don't fucking ever say that again when you get out of this conference room. Because you're just going to confuse people who are already confused. So that's sort of one point, is like clarity. I'll make one other piece of advice. There's this, I'm going to mention all these books. So there's this Jim Collins book, and I can't remember if it's in Built to Last or Good to Great. Both excellent books for company building. And one of the things that he talks about in one of these books is this thing called the Stockdale Paradox. And the Stockdale Paradox comes from this prisoner of war. Have you heard about this? Yeah, this prisoner of war in Vietnam or the Korean War, admiral. And he was a prisoner of war for many, many years with a bunch of his military colleagues or whatever they're called. And he survived. A lot of folks who were with him didn't. And one of the things that he was able to, in retrospect, realize about what sort of distinguished the people who survived versus the ones who didn't was that they were able to carry two ideas. They were able to carry the idea that eventually things were going to work out. But they were, in fact, prisoners of war, and it sucked, and it was brutal, and that was an awful, awful situation. So there was this ability to kind of carry the hope and the optimism and this notion that things could turn out great and they could get out with the brutality of the current reality. And I do think as entrepreneurs and Ben Horowitz, who I saw in some photographs and probably maybe has spoken to this group or you've read his book, he talks about management teams lying to themselves and not really confronting what is the current reality. Like what is the comprehensive list of the risks that are at play, and what's the current state of each of those risks? You got to hold that, and then you got to hold the idea that you're going to change the world, and you got to hold them both. And that's really hard, but I think the people who are able to get there sort of psychologically, emotionally, intellectually they're the best entrepreneurs.
Well, it's good advice. I think that that juxtaposition between that optimism for the future and what could be versus the 100 things that could kill you along the way.
Yeah.
It's hard to face both on a daily basis. I mean, Pinterest,
How did you do that? I've never been a CEO, so I've never really had to do that in the way that a CEO or founder does, but you have.
I see what you're doing here. It's not quite how it works.
I'm really curious.
I think it's I think you actually put it quite well. I think the hard part in any leadership position. How big is your organization now? So I'm sure you face this because you have
500.
You have 500.
Yeah.
So the problem is I think there's also I don't want to say EQ kind of emotional question. Where are people, right? The fact is people will both as a crowd and individually, depending where they are, lean one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
Wealthfront happen to be in financial business, so it's easy to believe when markets are good that everyone's a genius and everything's going well, and it's easy to believe when the markets are bad that everyone's an idiot and nothing makes sense. And actually, the interesting thing about the company is it exists because that money's like that for people. That's why it's better to let a computer do it.
Right.
But the company is populated with people, and they have all the same emotions. And so I think one of the challenges for leaders, you talk about Ben repeating himself, it's repeating yourself, but also knowing which of those to lean on. And sometimes people need to hear one versus the other, but not so much that you're not grasping at both. I mean, actually, in your world, I know for a while Pinterest had such explosive success in terms of engagement. I'm talking as the LinkedIn guy who never had 100th the engagement that Pinterest does. But fundamentally, so there was a lot of opportunity about what that potential business model would be. And I know that a lot of folks in the room have debates about what their business model is going to be. And I think there was a lot of excitement at Pinterest about both e-commerce and advertising, which have always been related, but are definitely not the same full go-to-market. You want to talk a bit about how that, it seems like it's ended up in the advertising camp. But
yeah, I mean, I think that it is in the advertising camp, but I think that we will continue to innovate on e-commerce and try to make it as easy as possible for a user when they find something to be able to buy it in a way that sort of makes sense for them and makes sense for the retailer who sells that thing. If you think about the mission of the company, mission of Pinterest is to help people discover and do what they love. And part of the reason that I got so excited about it, and this is to your point on engagement, is that it seemed like an opportunity that had some of the same characteristics that Google had when Google was created in the following sense, which is that the incentives of the consumer and the incentives of the businesses are really well aligned. In the same way with Google, like publishers, the needs of the publishers on Google are that they want to be found by people. The needs of the people are to find publishers. And so that works out really well. And in fact, the business model for Google is for publishers to pay to find more people. And so it's incredibly elegant in that sense. And I think one of the things that and God bless Facebook, they built a gigantic business, but I still would contend that the business model is a little bit orthogonal with what the organic experience is. The organic experience is fundamentally consumer to consumer. And what they do very cleverly and brilliantly is kind of get ads in there, and they're increasingly relevant, but they're not fundamentally indistinguishable from the organic experience. And in our case, because you are there to discover products and services, and retailers and merchants and bloggers are there to get their products and services discovered, we have sort of the same dynamic. So we have a dynamic where, in certain services we can show half the content can be ads, and our users don't complain. And we have cohorts of users that number in the millions that click twice as much on the ads as they do on the organic content. But I think to answer your question, we're in the ads business for now, and we'll keep figuring out kind of. I think the degree to which we innovate on e-commerce and try to make e-commerce work on Pinterest, it will be just in the name of making it more effective for retailers to get their stuff discovered and bought seamlessly.
That issue of alignment of kind of what the core of your product is and the business model is so essential, especially for consumer businesses.
Yeah.
Although I still see people assuming that you can somehow build a product and then tack on an arbitrary business model onto it. And it's clear that at scale they don't fit. Or if they don't fit, that misalignment can cause issues.
Yeah, agreed.
Let's segue just a little bit, and this is a little bit more current events. So but since you touched at least one of these companies, I mean,
I'm laughing because he told me we were going to talk about the Trump the whole time, or the indictments.
Yeah, I'm like, forget these questions. We're doing all indictments. No, that's Q&A afterward. I talked about those 5 big companies that everyone's talking about. I mean, right now in the zeitgeist, it seems to have shifted a bit. A few months ago, I felt Facebook was in the hot seat. Now it feels like everyone thinks Amazon is unstoppable. I mean, how do you think about? I mean, first of all,
yeah,
Pinterest is in the vicinity-ish, but not at all the same product. But I mean, you were
no,
there.
Not all the same size, and not even close in terms of like the power and domination.
Yeah. Do you think it's unstoppable? Do you think startups have a play, or I mean, where do you come out on this?
Well, I remember I remember sort of the moments in which various companies were thought of as either gone and dead or definitely like unassailable monopolies. I remember in 1996, 97, I might be getting the year wrong by 1 or 2, Microsoft, unassailable. No one could compete. We're out of luck. 1999, 2000, literally the FTC was looking at Yahoo for monopolistic practices. And it was the same, I remember the same conversation, like, you can't possibly build a web startup because Yahoo can just clone the feature, and you're effed. In 1997, there's this great cover of Time magazine, and it's the Apple logo, and it's in barbed wire, and all it says is "Pray" underneath it. Like, here we are, fucking 20 years later, and it's the biggest company in history, and it's about to hit $1 trillion market cap. I mean, so I think about when I think about that issue about is there space to compete with these 4 folks? I think about that, but I have to practice the Stockdale paradox and remember that maybe this time it's different, and maybe the current realities are such that that between Amazon and Google and Facebook, that maybe there is just less space right now. I tend to just in general believe in kind of the innovator's dilemma, that these incumbents eventually it's just a natural law, like they can't innovate fast enough, they can't expand fast enough to sort of keep pace with this group. Right, I just think that's going to be the case for a long time, and
well, I mean, that's the irony of the current era. Is it on the one hand, it seems like there's more paranoia and fear about these large tech giants and what it does to competition, but on the other hand, it seems like we have more multi-billion-dollar private companies than we've ever had before. It seems like there's more all the time, this year included, and of course, it seems like more and more startups hit breakout. So it's interesting that that's the zeitgeist. But I assume at Pinterest, Pinterest is such a unique product and service. How much of the day-to-day is competitive driver versus kind of what the product wants to be or what the business wants to be?
There's some time and energy spent on the competition because there's real competition out there. I mean, there's some people doing great work. I think Instagram's doing some great stuff that overlaps with what we're doing, and that is scary. I think that House is doing great stuff that is similar to what we want to do. I mean, they help people discover and take action on stuff that they love or within home decor. So we spent a little bit of time on that. I generally have a perspective that think most companies probably spend too much time there and not enough time on creating clarity, repeating what the plan is, making sure that the execution is like seamless and fast and good, and making sure that people are treating each other well. Like I actually just think that kind of stuff. I mean, and those aren't necessarily like mutually exclusive, but like there's only so much time in the day. And I do think that I tell the team, look, in 5 years, if this doesn't work out, it's not going to be because someone just stomped on us. It's going to be because we just didn't execute on the opportunity in front of us. It's too big of an opportunity. We're actually in too good of a position for us not to be incredibly successful, assuming you all execute in a way that you're capable of. But if you don't, then that will be the 5-year look back. It will be because we just didn't do our jobs.
That's the amazing thing when you see this amazing takeoff. You feel like you have this rare opportunity to do something with it. But every day it's...
And you don't, I mean, I always think like, I think there are a set of people who are at some of these companies who believe they had something to do with it. But the reality is like you kind of land on this thing and you realize that it's really special and that the idea of you're happening upon another one of these and having this kind of opportunity again is probably unlikely. And, again, I think there are some people who feel like that they created a success. But, at places like, Google, Facebook, and even Pinterest, like use like the business school term, the product market fit was created by the founders. And the rest of us are just sort of, we get to go along for the ride and make sure that we don't go off a cliff.
Well, that's the amazing thing. If you launch products and services that don't have product market fit or you're looking for it, it makes you appreciate it even more when you feel that tailwind, and you don't want to waste it. I think the last topic, and then we can open up for questions. I was just curious. I mean, it's one of the things I noticed about Pinterest. Pinterest, when I remember in the early product days, was so manual, and it was fun. A little bit of scavenger hunt, and I told you beforehand my dessert board, very proud of, and that sort of thing. And then I remember, I don't think Pinterest gets enough credit for its kind of efforts, since I have a bit of a search background. The efforts they made, like I remember when Pinterest search came out, and it immediately leapt up it felt like almost instantaneously into one of the best image searches out there. And I still, AI is such a big discussion now, image recognition. I feel like sometimes Pinterest doesn't get enough attention for all the efforts it's making there. Do you want to talk a bit about how you see the future around AI and machine learning and image search and what that might mean for Pinterest in the future?
Yeah. One of the things that's interesting about Pinterest, and I think this probably helps explain maybe a little bit of what you experienced on the search side, and people tell us the same thing about their experience with our recommendations in their feed, is that the underlying data set of Pinterest is all human built. So it literally, the underlying data set, which we call the taste graph, is literally 200 million people taking things and putting them into collections that they name. So you have this kind of mapping of everyone to their interests and their passions. And it's from that index that, if you apply then machine learning to this human index, which interesting, like would be very hard to replicate, right? It's not like a web index where you just could throw more machines at it and kind of replicate it. And it's not like social networks in the sense that, the mapping of a social network often is just catalyzed by sucking in an address book. Like we literally, Ben and Evan had to compel people to take what was in their head, which was like their interests and their passions and their tastes, and express it in Pinterest. But it's with that underlying data set that when we apply technology in the form of machine learning, we can deliver those kinds of search experiences that I think wow people. And I always think it's important to point out that it's not just the tech, it's the tech combined with clever product market fit that compelled enough people so we could amass enough data in kind of a unique way. It's that combo that then led to that experience. So yeah, like all of us, I guess, we use a lot of AI and machine learning, and I got to be careful here because I don't understand it at all. But we use it we have some we have a product called Lens that basically is a search product, but it's powered by your camera. So you can as an example, if I were, had these shoes on and I wanted to see outfits that I could wear with these shoes, I could just point Lens at these shoes, take a picture of it, and it would generate a search, and it would find a bunch of these shoes with outfits and give me sort of a sense for what I might be able to wear with these things. A similar use case people use with food, so they'll take a picture of a stupid use case, but take a picture of a banana. You have a banana on your counter, and it'll give you all these ideas for what you could do with that banana, like
Hot
desserts
dog,
you could
not
make.
hot dog.
Not hot dog. Yeah, exactly. Banana split, like whatever. And so that obviously, the technology there is, computers that can look at images and make sense out of those images. And we use that for Lens, but we also use it for ads. So we're using image recognition pretty extensively in ads. So we're actually, when a user picks, they're going through their feed on Pinterest, and let's say they see like a living room vignette. They'll tap that living room vignette. It'll expand to a bigger picture, and then below that are a bunch of recommendations that are associated with that vignette, and some of those could be ads. And the way that we do the matching, the way that we figure out what ads to put against that living room vignette, in kind of the old ad world, you'd have a bunch of keywords, right? You'd have like living room and blue and couch and all that stuff, and you'd take those terms and you would go into your ad database and you would look for matching of terms. What's really interesting is that with image recognition, computer vision, you can scan that living room vignette, come up with, 10,000 attributes instead of, a couple hundred keywords. Take those 10,000 attributes and then scan all the images in your ad database and then do the ranking on the basis of that. And the relevancy is so much better because you're just, you're using 3 orders of magnitude more data. Which is pretty cool.
No, it makes sense when you put it that way. I can't think about, you see some of that intelligence around personal photos, around what people consider a good photo, or they took 100 shots on their iPhone, which is the one they actually decide to post, that sort of thing. But curated sets of how products fit together, you're right, like getting hundreds of millions of people to basically train your software to pick the right product to fit with that set is pretty unique. Yeah. Well, I could ask a bunch more questions, but I want to give time, since we have limited time, to have some questions from the audience. Anyone brave enough to ask the first question?
Hey, thanks for the interesting talk. I wanted to ask, what's Pinterest's strategy to compete with the likes of Facebook? You work for Mark Zuckerberg. You said yourself how amazingly quickly they can iterate. You see what they're doing to Snapchat. Recently releasing the collections, which is like taking a page right out of Pinterest books. What's the strategy for a smaller company to compete with a giant like that?
Well, I think you got to know what your core is and what theirs, what they will have challenges doing. And they did launch collections. I think we have a view, and we could be wrong with this view. We have a view that I think that people don't want to. Pinterest is a very kind of you-centric service where people go on there. They're not there to show stuff to their friends. They're not there to learn about what their friends are up to. So the social networking part is not actually there. And I think people like that. And I think that's why they're comfortable on Pinterest kind of exploring their taste and then actually planning their lives accordingly, like planning what they want to eat, planning what they want to wear, what do they want their house to look like. What do they want their hair to look like? It's a vulnerable place for people, and the brand is such, and the trust is high enough that people are comfortable being there. I think we just believe that's not gonna be something that, and we could be wrong, that social networks are going to be just because of the nature of them. They're not going to be good at. But we'll see. We'll see if I'm right.
Time will tell.
Yeah. I also think that, and this was to my earlier point, I think that when you're on a social network, you've got really high degrees of social intent. You don't, I spent 5 years there working on ads. You don't have a lot of commercial intent. They have so much time spent now, and so much kind of retargeting data that they're able to compensate for that. I think what we have is we have a lot of people who are on Pinterest who are planning for very specific things. So the kind of things that we can give to advertisers are things they can't get elsewhere. So we can say to someone, if someone makes, a mid-century modern bedside table, we can actually put them in front of people who are moved into their house a year ago, are redecorating their bedroom, and are actively selecting a bedside table, and plus have mid-century modern taste. Like, that's just precision that I think, apart from using retargeting data from site revisiting and so forth, I think social networks would struggle with.
I have a question about, my name is Yossi, by the way, nice
Hi.
to meet you. I have a question about driving traffic from different sources. And so, for example, Pinterest for me at the beginning was something different than it is right now. I used Pinterest in the beginning, now it's more like a discovery platform for a lifestyle, the way that I perceive it at least. And so most of the time that we spend today on social networks, we are exposed to different lifestyles. And you were talking about the camera product that allows you to take a picture of something and then analyze it through Pinterest. And the question is, are you guys working on anything that will allow me to insert pictures that I can take screenshots and other areas into Pinterest in order for that to analyze and bring traffic from other resources? That's one. And the second thing is more in relation to APIs, right? And so, because I was a Pinterest user at the beginning and now I'm not, I'm trying to figure out how are you guys going to drive the old customers or different type of behaviors bake into the app?
Well, on the first question, we are actively trying to figure out, one of the things that I think Instagram has done really well that we haven't done very well is I think they've created an ecosystem for individual content creators and influencers to thrive. So people can post content on Instagram and derive a following and get real value in terms of audience exposure and engagement. And we don't really offer the same thing. And so without saying too much, I think that we have to figure out what our answer to that is. We have to figure out a way for if you are an influencer, you need to be able to use Pinterest to showcase your style. And we need to, in exchange for you're doing that on Pinterest, we need to give you value back in some way. And we're in the midst of figuring that out and figuring out what those mechanisms and products look like. So I think that's the answer to your first question. I didn't totally follow the second part. Sorry.
It was more in relation to how you can bring traffic back in. So, for example, let's take myself as a consumer. I'm now watching a video on Facebook.
Yep.
One of the gazillion videos they have over there. And I see a lifestyle that I'm really interested in. Now I want to connect between that and searching for those type of merchandise products. Now I know that I can go off and do that on Pinterest, but those two words are not connected. And so you were talking about usage of a camera. So can I take a snap of a picture of my screenshot and then feed that back into Pinterest, which is something that doesn't exist today. So, are you connecting with those?
We are. So if any of you have a Galaxy 8, based on every Samsung phone now, we're embedded in the browser and we're embedded in their native camera app.
There are no Samsung phones in the Silicon Valley. I'm kidding, but yeah.
I know. Well, there are in the world because they have 80%. Android has 80% market share. In Samsung phones, their flagship phone today, in their native, actually the native camera app is not really relevant. We're embedded in that. What's more relevant to your question is we're embedded in their browser, in every browser. So if you long press on an image in the mobile web on a Samsung phone browser, it generates a Pinterest image search. That then the results for which drive you into Pinterest, which I think is the answer to your question. So that's kind of the first partnership that we did in that regard, and I think there will probably be more.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ofer, an Israeli founder, slight Israeli accent. I moved here 6 years ago, sold my company last year, and today I'm happy to be a friend and mentor at Icon. And I want to go back, talk about culture. As founders, we care a lot about culture. We talk about it. I invest still today, after the acquisition, 25% of my time about culture. And yet, when you work with engineers, in Israel and here in the Valley as well, I find it's very hard to invest in culture when you work with a big engineering team. Talking to other founders, I hear it a lot, and I wonder if you have any tips about how you can better engage engineering team around
In culture?
Yes.
Well, one of the things
If
that
possible.
one of the things that we did that I wish we still did, and it's actually consistent with a study that there's a study that Mitch Kapoor did, who founded Lotus and now is a obviously prominent seed investor, and the study is around the degree to which company values are adhered to. So values they don't always have to correspond one-to-one with culture, but they're directionally similar. It's a study that shows that the companies that adhere better to their values, something about how that's like a driver for success. I'm kind of butchering the study. Here's what we did and don't do anymore, but I wish we did, and I think maybe a solution, which is that when we did performance reviews, you were evaluated on 2 dimensions. One was the degree to which you performed. So what was your impact? And then it was a 3x3 matrix. It was like, okay, on impact, you were high, middle, low. And then you were evaluated on the degree to which you embodied the values. High, medium, low. Because we felt like the values were sort of this, if you embodied the values, you were creating and sustaining value in the company. And you were inherently creating impact by being an embodiment of those values. And I can't remember if that was effective in particular in engineering. I thought broadly it was effective because it kept values top of mind, and it signaled that we cared and that we were measuring it and talking about it and paying attention to it. And I think somehow we convinced ourselves that was too complex, and now we just talk about impact, which is important. But I actually love I liked it when we did that. And if we redo our system, I'll probably advocate to go back for it. And certainly if I started a company, I would spend a lot of time making sure I got my values right, knowing that they can be changed, making sure I was communicating like crazy about my values, and maybe making my performance review tied to them, like just incentivizing people to adhere to them.
I would agree. The performance review, and it's also the day-to-day how you act as a leader. I mean,
Yeah.
people, especially engineers. I'm speaking as someone who started my career as an engineer, and now people won't let me code anymore. But fundamentally, engineers in particular detect hypocrisy quickly in every action.
Yep.
Right. So if the moment you know as a leader that you're actually taking culture seriously is the minute you're willing to walk away from top talent
Yes.
because of their behavior. And if you're not, no matter what you say, people figure that out. So I would agree, whether it's the performance reviews, if it's decision making, if it's one-off behavior, and sometimes I think that leaders aren't always honest with themselves. They say it's important and they do it, but when push comes to shove, they're saying, yeah, but this person, I know they're rough around the edges, but they're key to our technical efforts. I mean, you have to be honest about where you are as a company and what decisions and trade-offs you're really making. But
What's the term when you give someone an employment offer and then you pull it? Rescind. I mean, some of the more important cultural signals, and this gets to what Adam was saying, is when we've rescinded offers because of how candidates behave. And we make it we don't make it public, but within that team who made the offer, and we're pretty clear that we rescinded the offer, and we rescinded the offer because that person behaved poorly in these 3 ways, and we just don't think they're going to be a fit.
Hi, I'm Micah. I have a question. You brought up market fit a couple of times. How do you guys decide when a feature or a part of the product reaches market fit? Do you have metrics? Do you do is it a hunch? There is some sort of a methodology behind the decision making, or is it just let's throw it out there, see the engagement, and figure this out? Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I think companies are pretty notoriously bad at this. We weren't even good at this at Facebook. I mean, I think that I remember there being us having this kind of oh wow moment, and we've had similar moments at Pinterest when some data scientist or even just an analyst makes a list of all the features, and then enumerates the penetration and usage of those features kind of on a DAU basis. And you're like, oh my God, no one uses anything that we've built except for, and this was true of Facebook too, except for photos and newsfeed. Like, yeah, but we built this. Like, yeah, no one uses it. And so I'm saying kind of two things at the same time. One is that I think you got to be brutal about measuring it, while also at the same time giving yourself space to iterate and improve. I mean, these things take time to get right. I think that we have made the mistake, and I see lots of companies make the mistake of adding features to the core product and kind of putting it off to the side and wondering why no one's using it. Well, because no one can find it. Like, adding a tab is not a distribution strategy for a new feature. Like, it needs to be, there's a guy at Facebook who's still there who used to say, you got to put it in the river. Like, put the feature in the middle of the river, which is basically the middle of the feed, or somewhere on the main page, or else you're not even going to give it a fighting chance. And then the second point is that, and this is a slightly cynical view of Facebook, but if you think about the fundamental features of Facebook that are basically comprise what we use today, photos, newsfeed, messaging. All of those were built in 2005 or 2006. Sorry, in groups, and that was built in 2010. But everything else, and God bless them for doing lots of different things, and I'm being a little bit glib, but the point is that you've got kind of your core, and sometimes you're better off just improving your core versus deluding yourself into thinking there's something else out there. And whether it's one or the other, I don't know. That's why you hopefully have good judgment. You can make a call one way or the other.
Tim, Jason Wolf. I got my questions through text. My daughter's 18. My wife is, we won't mention ages, but I'm not a user of Pinterest, but both of them heard that I'm here, and it was like I'm at some kind of groupie. You should see my text. But I think for founders, it's an interesting question because sometimes you look at markets, segments, ages, sex. Where does that play? Because I'm not a user, and I'm not a typical man. But do you guys look at that? Do you have kind of a vision of where you want to be, or is it the market taking you to a certain thing? Just give me a couple of minutes, so when I meet my 18-year-old in an hour at San Jose State on the way home, I'll have something to talk about.
I'll do my best. Well, I will say, and this will be interesting, I think, for the entrepreneurs. Ben, when he started Pinterest, it took him, depending on when you decide the founding of Pinterest is, it's somewhere between kind of 18 and 24 months to get any kind of semblance of kind of liftoff. And during this time, he basically was cultivating a set of power users and developing intimate relationships with them to understand sort of viscerally what was it about Pinterest that they liked, what didn't they like, and how could he make it better. He was manning the customer service queue single-handedly for like a year. And admittedly, it wasn't a huge customer base, but it was thousands of users. So he was getting a lot of input. So I say that just because I think he really, in a way that I haven't heard other entrepreneurs do, although I think some of them probably just do it intuitively. He just very clearly got into the head of this core consumer and kind of knew her intimately, and then was able to kind of channel and improve the product in a way where it just really resonated, and ultimately, became a bigger set of people who are now in love with it. Today it's a little more scientific, right? I mean, you kind of just look at sometimes you look at a map of the United States and you cut it by socioeconomics, by gender, by age, and you look where are you underpenetrated, where are you overpenetrated. And where you're not over, there's no sort of over, but like where are you underpenetrated, and are there commonalities about those things that could help you sort of grow in those areas? I mean, one of the things that we've started to do is the playbooks that we have in different countries. So the playbook that we have in Spain and France and the UK is really a playbook where we go in and we localize the content. We get a set of people who are in the country who have great content. We sort of have this playbook where we kind of catalyze really kind of a network effect between content creators and owners in that market and then consumers who are into that content. And it just seems to work. We are now starting to apply that in segments of the United States where we're under penetrated, because there are segments of the United States that are, in a sense, sort of like mini countries, right? And so we're applying that. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but
Well, you are. You're just not answering the question of, are you giving up on 49-year-old old balding males?
No.
And focusing on a certain segment?
We're
or
not.
You're just trying to get
you
to
know
everybody?
what? 500,000 people signed up for Pinterest today, and 200,000 of them were men. So it's 40% of signups today. And when I joined 6 years ago, it was 98% women, 2% men. And now it's 70% women, 30% men. Now, I'll be, transparent. Like the 70% women are more engaged than the 30% men. But there are 30% active users on there who are male. And I think what we do transcends gender. I mean, I think there is a stereotype, particularly in the U.S., which is that Pinterest is kind of more for women. I mean, you just sort of said it yourself.
I didn't know it until
Yeah.
I just heard it.
Yeah, and so implicitly you're sort of saying that, right? Because you haven't heard of it. But I think the idea of discovering, the idea of planning what you want to do with your life, from what do you want to cook for your family for dinner tonight to what do you want to wear to the party on Saturday to where do you want to travel for the holidays, everyone wants to figure that stuff out, not just women. So I think it's just a question of kind of reaching those people and compelling them with the product in the same way that we've done with women.
Hi, my name is Dan from Wix.com. I wanted to ask if you have other business development with other companies. You talked before about your connection with Samsung, for example. So do you have any other work with other big companies?
That's probably we have advertising partnerships, but I don't think that's what you mean. I mean, I think you mean like partnerships. That's really the big one that I can talk to, and Target. And Target's so we now we licensed Lens, and so they're now going to integrate Lens into their shopping app. But those two, I would say in the scheme of companies that on the spectrum of companies that partner heavily, we don't partner a lot. And that's not necessarily by design. I think it's because we haven't quite figured out exactly the right way to figure out partnerships, candidly. I hope there's no one in the press who quotes me on that. But
I have a question.
Great.
You've been to amazing companies and great times. What's next for you?
Well, that will be quoted in the press. I mean, I love what I'm doing now, and I feel like I feel a sense of I didn't start the company, but I do feel like I really helped build it and really helped shape the culture, and so a big part of me, and a big reason why I still get up every morning and go, is actually to see how this kind of this culture experiment is going to play out. Like, is this culture that we've deliberately made nice and pleasant, and it's not perfect, by the way, but like we've deliberately made to be, kind of the anti-Uber. How's that going to work out? Like, is our thesis that this type of culture, deliberately constructed and cultivated, going to lead to a great business outcome? And I think there are two schools of thought in it. I think there's definitely a school of thought that's like, you know what, those guys are too nice, and they're going to get their lunch handed to them. And then there's another school of thought that believes that, they're going to retain people much better. Their sense of purpose in both the culture and the company is more clear, and I want to see that out. So I'm going to be there for a while, I think. Unless I come up with a great idea like all of these people. But I've never really had very good ideas. I just glom onto others.
Hi, my name is Effie, and I have two questions. The first one is, we talked all about Facebook, Google, and I want to focus on Google. Do you think there's room for antitrust at this point with Google control of the market, and how does it affect you and many other companies?
Well, that's definitely out of my realm of expertise.
And then the indictments.
And then the indictments. 3 people were indicted today. I am interested. I'll answer it this way. I am really interested to see what happens in the realm of antitrust with all of these companies, because I think that as the work that Amazon's doing begins to really impact retailers, I mean, I think it's already happening, but I think it's probably going to happen in a continued way, where your Congress folks are going to start to hear from their constituents about the fact that their businesses are hurting. And so to me, I'm going farther in this question than I wanted to.
The way that affects Pinterest these days, do you think it hurts your ability to grow?
Do I think Google hurts us?
Google, one of the big giants.
Well, Google helps us a lot. We get a lot of our growth from, not a lot, but more than I want to say quantitatively, growth from Google search. So we rely on them from an ecosystem standpoint, and they're very beneficial to us. Even Facebook, we get a decent amount of traffic from. So it's hard to say that those folks are in any sort of measurable way hurting us. And then I suppose, I mean, it does feel, I will say, it does feel like Amazon, God, they're just like going. We talk a little bit internally just how they're just, it's this massive like vertical integration, right? From like, we were just selling products, but now we're in search, and now we're actually maybe going to get into discovery, because now Alexa has a TV on it, and you can just say, hey, show me this, show me recipes to cook. Well, that sounds similar to kind of what someone else does. And then below buying the product, like, oh, we're going to bring it to you. We're actually going to start buying our own planes, because we don't need DHL and FedEx. We'll just do it ourselves, and we'll buy our own trucks, and we'll drive it right to your doorstep. So there's this clearly in both directions, this vertical integration that's happening that's, I think, scary to a lot of us. Scary to retailers, scary to us, scary to the shipping industry. All right, I'm gonna stop talking.
Although clearly they have some magic powers, because of all those big companies, the only antitrust action recently of significance was the ebooks one,
Right.
where somehow it was not Amazon but Apple, who I think has, rounding error, no
Right.
market share
Right.
in ebooks,
Ebooks.
that actually got in trouble for it. So
Yeah.
it seems unpredictable.
I think we have time for one last
One more
question. Well, if there is none, I made my team actually read about you before coming here. The girls that work in my office, and their one question was, is it true that you do an ice shower every morning?
It's
a good question. It's definitely a good question.
This has become a really unhealthy obsession of mine, and I think when it got written somewhere, at that point I was still using a normal bath, and now it's escalated. Now I have a freezer in my backyard, like the chest freezer that you put meat into or ice cream, and I filled it up with water, which is not what they're designed for. And then I've turned it on, and I can get the water down to like 30, 31 degrees. And then I get it in the morning, and then it's escalated even further in the last month. I now have a turbine that I put in there, because moving water is colder than still water. So it is true. I now get in this freezer every morning at like 6 in the morning for 5 minutes.
But why?
It's just like,
Follow-up question.
so, it's really interesting. I'll keep it very sick. The reason I do is I just feel great when I get out. It's kind of like it's like working out, except it takes less time and you feel really good. It's really good for your immune system. I since doing that, especially more intensely in the last 6 months, I haven't gotten sick at all. And there is a lot of research that shows that it's very good for immune support. And it is interesting, if you go back sort of pre-established Western medicine, like in the 1800s, like people were doing, this was like ice bathing was like one of the big treatments of disease. Like you would go to these sanitariums in Germany, and it would just be full of baths, like ice baths that people would get into. So, and then Western medicine got created, and now we take antibiotics when we're sick, but it used to be. Yeah.
Well,
Valid
you.
point.
thank you for the answer, and thank you for coming, and thank you, Adam, for interviewing.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was great.